Hey guys, it's Chris with Drop Dice, and I am back again talking to you guys about what is Blades in the Dark. And today, as promised in the last video, we're going to actually make a character. We are going to be making the Cutter. Now, before we jump into it, I do have my PDF on my tablet here, so that's where I'm mainly going to be reading from. Some of this information is in the Roll20, however, you're not going to see it because I can only really open so many windows at a time to be able to show you guys. So if you are interested in Blades in the Dark, again, I'm going to throw a link to the Evil Hat website inside here. It does have character sheets, so you can kind of follow along if you're going to be a player in a Blades in the Dark game. However, if you feel like supporting the author John Harper, make sure you go to DriveThruRPG and purchase his book there. I do not own the game system, I'm just a fan. So, with that said, this is kind of a ramp up for my own campaign of Blades in the Dark and kind of walking myself through and learning as I go, but also teaching you guys as I go about learning this stuff myself. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to switch the scenes here so that we open up to Roll20. And again, I showed you guys some of this Roll20 stuff last time, but I do want to show you some of the changes I've made. I've done some nested macros and stuff like that, so now if I want to go to the factions, instead of having like each area of the city broken down like I did before for the map, and then each faction having its own gang handout, what I can do here is go into factions, and then it's got my generic symbol for gangs here. And then these are all of the factions that are within the city. Some of them are gangs and some of them are not. The ones that are gangs that do have information available to them inside the book, for example, let's say the Lamp Blacks, one of those starting gangs. If I click on it, it now opens up the Lamp Blacks entry. It tells me all that information that we talked about last time and their clock. This is just a little bit easier way to do it, and eventually I'm going to have a macro enabled so that if I need to pull this information inside the chat, I can do so. If you want to learn how to do this and more really great stuff with Roll20, I'd suggest taking 20. Cody on that channel does a really great job of just kind of walking you through that stuff, and frankly, what I have on here wouldn't be possible if I did not have a little bit of guidance. It looks like I'm having a server connection interruption. It might just be because I'm running a few different programs right now to get the recording, so we're just going to give it a couple seconds. It should go back online, and it won't save anything while this is going on. So for now, we're just going to kind of leave it and see if the status changes. I'm not editing anything. There it goes. So it's not going to change anything when I go to Duskwall and Beyond. I used kind of a map marker. But if I want to take a look at, like, let's say the Shattered Isles map, and click on that, supersize it for anybody who wants to take a look at it, I can show it to players. So these are all kind of cool features you get with Roll20. But also I can do, okay, we're in Brightstone, which is the district right here that you can see. Let's see who lives there. Go to the notables, click on that. And this is that same page that you get in the handouts. I just wanted to show you guys some of the organization level stuff in case you had any questions about that when it comes up to writing your own or making your own Roll20 campaign. Very similar style. So inside the notables, I'll know that Lord Strangford, for example, is there. And we kind of talked about these scenes, streets, and buildings last time, so let's just jump right in now that I'm connected back to the server. I did make a generic gang character because one of the things that I did want to point out, this character sheet is phenomenal, first off, but there's three modes. There's character mode, crew mode, and then faction mode, which I'm going to rename this to, instead of being gang, this is going to be crew, just because that is what it is. It's not necessarily a gang per se, but a crew per the terms used in the book. So when I decide to build my crews, I'm going to use this one as my example, but today we're actually going to make a brand new character. So here's how you make a brand new character. You're going to add, you can choose to do a character. It'll pop right up here, and I like to file everything inside the appropriate header, so I'm just going to drop that in here. There we go. And this is going to be our Cutter, which let's take a look here and see if we've got some random name charts from the book. Here we go. So if you do open up the book and kind of follow along, page, let's see, 56, actually does have some of the And that's the book page, not the PDF page. If you had the PDF page and you are on version 8.1, which is the one that's going to the printer, it's going to be PDF page number 64, book page number 56, in case you have the book. So it's got a list of different names there, family names, aliases, and these all, remember, tie back to the city. So some of these names will be attached to important figures. So I'm just going to kind of look at the list here, and I'm going to say I like Bricks because we are talking about a cutter. And let's give our character a last name. Let's say Bricks Colburn. That sounds like a pretty fun name there. So Bricks Colburn will be myself as the player, and I'm going to say that myself is the only person who can edit it. So let me remove all players. If I was writing this for another character, I could also select the GM as who can edit and control it, just in case you want to be able to control that. I don't use a lot of the map features, but I do like the way that these tokens are done. Now, if I had a picture available for this character, which I don't, I could always click this or drop it inside there. Let's see if I can find a picture that would be a good example for you here. Okay, here's one. So go ahead and drop that inside there. And now the cool thing is now that I've gotten a picture for Bricks, you can see his little picture icon right over here on the side, inside the dossier, if you will. You can also give it a default token. If you don't give it a token, it will use the actual portrait itself here. When you do tokens, I do recommend using square shapes to fit the map a little bit cleaner, or if you're using a grid, a hex grid, cutting your shapes to fit that hex grid a little bit more appropriate, which I don't remember the exact sizes. You can find that on the Roll20 wiki. Once you've got that done, just go ahead and save the changes. That will make the character functional and perfect and like actually able to edit. So once we go in here, we can always name him again Bricks Colburn, and his alias is just going to be Bricks. That's what most people know him as. We're not going to name the crew because I haven't made a crew just yet. And then let's take a look at the step-by-step on how to create a character. And we're going to do this at least for the first one, and then we'll kind of go through and play it a little bit more natural and see if this process works out really well for us. So now that we've... One of the first things they tell you is to pick a playbook. So I'm going down the line, and I'm picking the Cutter. So let's talk about the Cutter real quick here. And once again, anytime you change the job right here, or the playbook rather, it does change the skills and things like that. So you can basically not have to create a master list of character sheets like I've done previously for games to create copies. Instead, it's actually built into the sheet, and that is the default sheet for Roll20 in case you're curious. So the Cutter is defined as cutters are good at winning fights with violence and with intimidation. Play a Cutter if you want to get your way. So that's the kind of character that we're going to make. If you notice the starting dots, we have some in Skirmish, which is mainly used to fight, and Command, which is to impose your will on someone, to give them commands, that sort of thing. So it says here, once we've chosen a playbook, we're going to be choosing a set of special abilities, which will give your character ways to break the rules in various ways, and a set of XP triggers to determine how you gain experience. So this game is a fiction first game, and they basically break down how to gain experience for each character very clearly. The character sheets look very similar to this, so you'll see a section that says Playbook Advancement. So for example, the Cutter, anytime we want to play one, let's see, every time you roll a desperate action, mark experience in that action's attribute. The attributes would be these three here: Insight, Prowess, and Resolve. When they talk about rolling an action, that would be, let's say you're in a skirmish and you have to roll a desperate action, you're going to mark experience using these little tickers right here next to Prowess, because that's what governs skirmish. You address a challenge with violence or coercion. This second dot here is going to be specific to each class. It's going to change a little bit. Everyone will get a chance to make a desperate action, and then the other two everyone will have a chance for, but this is specific to the Cutter. When the Cutter addresses a challenge with violence or coercion, they gain experience. And the cool thing about these next three here are if you gain these during play, you don't get them right away like you would for a desperate action. At the end of the session, these ones you do. So at the end of session, you mark 1 experience if you've done it at least once, or 2 if the item occurred multiple times. So let's say that your character, who's the Cutter, does a lot of the guiding people through military tactics, using command checks, getting into fights. That's probably addressing a challenge with violence or coercion. So that's going to be 2 boxes that they can tick. And then the third line here is you express your beliefs, drives, heritage, or background, which we'll get a little bit more into what those are mechanically, but narratively speaking, you guys can kind of get the gist of that. If my character through RP talks about where he comes from, what drives him forward, what his beliefs are, that could garner up to another 2 experience points, so I'd be at a total of 4. And then if you struggle with any issue from your vice or trauma during the session, which we'll talk about as well a little bit later, you will gain experience. And let's say that for some reason my character did have a terrible time with his trauma, he'll gain another 2, so that's up to 6 that he could gain in 1 session, plus any desperate rolls that he would have gotten along the way. So that kind of gives you an idea of how these tracks work. Once you fill up the playbook advancement, you can take a special ability, or you can take a skill dot. If you fill up the skill, or if you fill up the playbook, rather, you take a special ability. If you fill up the attribute track, you can apply another dot to a type of action. So that kind of gives you an idea, breakdown of how advancement works inside the game. So the one thing that this sheet does not auto-populate, which I'm a little disappointed about, but I understand why, is they don't auto-populate your special abilities. So we're going to have to open up the actual character sheets to take a look at those, just to pick out what special ability we'll have. So the cool thing about this game is if you look at each playbook, they do have a thing called Veteran Advance, which means that you can take a playbook advance from, or a special ability from another playbook. So instead of being a Cutter ability, if I wanted to, I could take a Lurk ability, which is like a sneakier type character instead of being more of a thug. So with that, I can actually expand my repertoire and my special abilities to maybe help out the gang with what we typically do on adventures. Get me an ability that makes more sense for my character, narratively speaking, or makes me more badass in combat. Whatever the choice is, of course. So the first thing that we do is we choose a heritage. And you remember that map. Let's go ahead and pull that up here. Factions of Duskfall and Beyond, the Shattered Isles, and we'll zoom into this map here. So this map kind of tells us where we are. I think for our Cutter, I'm going to make a good old boy from Duskfall. He is from Akaros, the city of Duskfall. So now that I've got that, I can close this out of the way. And for heritage, we'll put Akaros. And in parentheses, I'm going to put Duskfall. So whenever you add your heritage, you should include a little descriptor inside there. Basically, a character's heritage describes where their family is from. You may be of any heritage you choose. And if you decide, let's see, and then if you decide you're a foreigner who has immigrated to Duskfall, or you're a local who grew up there. So I think my character is a local. Like I said, he's a good old boy. When you choose a heritage, let's see, circle it on the playbook. So normally in the playbook, these are written out. You can just circle Akaros on there, and then you write the detail, which is that from Duskfall there. So the example that they give is, for example, you might choose to be a Scovelin heritage and write factory workers from Lockport, now refugees. I think I'm going to put Duskfall. Let's go with, I like the idea of a factory worker. That's a pretty good example. So that kind of gives us an idea of who our character was before we really got into the action. Next, we're going to look at, let's see here. Here's the brief description here. So Akaros is the largest, most industrialized land in the Imperium and home to the capital city, as well as Duskfall itself, known for diverse conglomerations of cultures that have been grown together in close proximity for centuries, somewhat like Europe. So I like the idea of kind of this weird Lightning City being a factory worker in there, so that definitely works out. Let's see here. Okay. Next, we're going to choose a background, which backgrounds have a list of selections available to them as well. The options are academic, labor, law, trade, military, noble, or underworld. I think given what we've decided about being a factory worker, I think what we're going to say is that maybe his parents couldn't get him out of it, and he comes from a labor background, that he may have been a laborer himself as well. And then I have to provide a detail. So I think what I'm going to say is he was he worked in the metal foundries. Pouring liquid metals, casting them into cogs and things like that, just to keep the machines, the Imperium running, the Leviathan ships that are out there, stuff like that. Okay, and next we're going to assign our action dots. So you get 4 action dots to choose from, and your playbook begins with 3 that are already placed. So by the time we're done, we're going to have a total of 7. We're going to put 1 dot in any action that we feel represents my heritage, which, remember, is that Duskwall factory worker. And I think for that, Duskwall is kind of a rough and tumble city. I think skirmish might be good, but there is a catch on this. You can't have, let's see, anything with more than 2 at the beginning of the game unless a special ability tells you otherwise. So my skirmish is already full. I've worked most of my life pouring metals and things like that, so maybe let's kind of jump over to the background, because the background's going to get me a dot too. Not only have I crafted things, I've also wrecked things. But I think he worked more on the crafting side, so I'm going to go with 1 on Tinker. And being a Duskwall factory worker, he's had to kind of appraise things and take a look at it. Maybe he's had to use finesse to try and get the thing worked out, or like I said, wreck. Just to tear apart bad metals from good metals. And I think that I'm going to go with wreck. So that's 2 of my dots out of the 4 that I got. I then get to assign 2 dots anywhere I please, but 2 is the maximum again. So something that I know from further reading inside the book is, I mentioned it last time, whenever you roll a defense, you use this column here to determine how many dice you get. I want this character to be kind of survivable. Like right now, if I roll a prowess defense, I'm getting at least 2 dots, which is good. But if I do insight and resolve, I only get 1 die towards my resistance. Because I want to survive much longer, I think what I'm going to do is survey. Sounds like it would be good and fit that idea of being a person who's looking at scrap metals, trying to find things of value and melt those down to create new products. So that will definitely work there. Command is really fitting for the idea of a factory worker. Maybe he was working his way up to be like a shift supervisor or something. Attune doesn't really make sense. That's how you manipulate magic in the world, or at least you get close to the ghost field, which is kind of the source of magic in Duskwall. Consort is basically being able to socialize and things like that, but where that's a little bit different is sway, which is consorting is more like it's a tit for tat type of thing, whereas sway is more like I'm persuading you, I'm trying to get you to do things for me. So I think he's more of a consort guy. So that's going to start me with 2 in each ability, and that makes me pretty durable as far as a character generated or a character generation goes. I could have been more in prowess and maybe less in resolve, and that would make sense. But I think I like this idea a little bit better based upon some of the stuff that we talked about. Next, we're going to choose our special ability, which will give us some different options to choose from. So before we get too far into that, let's go ahead and open a new tab, and we'll go to Evil Hat. And again, this is where you're going to be able to find the character sheets and stuff like that. Is Evil Hat Productions website, evilhat.com. Then go to role-playing games, Blades in the Dark, It'll pop up there, go to downloads, and we're going to open up the Cutter for everybody to see. And here's a list of the different abilities that Cutters get. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit here, just because I'm a little blind. So, looking down the list, we've got a couple of good ones. I talked about being durable, so I'm going to look for some armor options or some things that would make me survive more, because I like this idea of him being a tough factory worker, that like the real reason he's in this gang is because he can take a wrench to the face and keep going. So the first one that stands out is Battleborn here, and it gives you special armor, which is over here on this side. That's how you track it. You may expend your special armor to reduce harm from an attack in combat and push yourself during a fight. So basically, this is that ability I was talking about, being hit with a wrench and just pushing through it, making the Cutter feel kind of like your movie action hero, just taking a punishment and going. I like that one. Bodyguard allows you to protect someone, which I think might be a good investment in the future, but not necessarily for me right now. Ghost Fighter allows me to use any weapons I have against supernatural beings. Normally, when you do that, you don't really get anywhere with them. You're trying to hit a ghost with a lead pipe. It doesn't make sense. But with Ghost Fighter, it's like having key strikes on a monk. You can fight magical things. There's Leader, which I think could possibly be something later on, but I don't think fits Bricks at the moment. Mule means that you can carry heavier loads, which is cool, but again, not fitting my concept. That would probably be lower on my list at the moment. Not to be trifled with. This is kind of an interesting one, and every class has one of these abilities that basically when you push yourself, meaning you give extra effort to a task that you're doing, you can choose to perform one of the following, which is perform a feat of physical force that verges on superhuman, or engage a small gang on equal fitting and close combat. So a good way to think about, not to be trifled with, is the Kung Fu movies when the guy is surrounded and there's 8 warriors around him. He pushes himself and he can take on these 8 different warriors. When you push yourself, you become more potent or you gain an extra die. So that's kind of how that would be narrated out. Like, you're surrounded, you fight on equal footing with them, or of course performing a physical feat of physical force that verges on superhuman. Could be something like lifting a bunch of industrial beams off of one of your allies, something like that. So that one's cool, and it does fit with kind of my idea, but not yet. Savage gives you, when you unleash physical violence, especially when it's especially frightening. When you command a frightened target, you get an extra bonus dice. Again, sounds good, but not for now. Vigorous, you recover from harm faster, permanently fill one of your healing clock segments, and take +1 die to healing treatment rolls. So I really like this one too, because this one makes healing and your overall survivability in the game much better. So normally what happens is when you are injured, you have to fill up this healing clock, which has 4 slices in it. And the higher you roll, the more slices get filled in, and basically your harm bumps down a level. So if you have a level 3 harm, it becomes level 2 becomes level 1, level 1 removes from your sheet. So this, instead of having to get it every 4 slices, essentially, I'm getting it every 3 slices, which is huge. And I really like Vigorous, so I think that's what we're going to take, is Vigorous. So jumping down here, I'm just going to copy paste that inside, and then I'm going to clean up some formatting real quick, just because I don't want it to look weird. Okay. Alright, and I'm just going to go ahead and click in one of these here. My clock is considered always full, and I get a bonus die whenever there's healing treatment done. So that's kind of how special abilities work and how our actions work. Let's take a look at the book and see what our next step is. From here, we are going to, let's see here. Oh, a special note. If you take an ability that has special armor, it doesn't weigh anything. It's just like a special resistance thing that you can do. We're going to choose one friend, or close friend, and one rival. And this is kind of how the game allows us to explore relationships. And so let's take a look real quick here. for the friends and rivals of the Cutter. They are the dangerous friends here. My favorite one on this list is Marlene the Pugilist, because I love pugilists in games. So I think I'm going to take her, whether as a friend or a rival. Let's see here. There's Kale the Vicious Thug, Mercy the Cold Killer, Grace the Extortionist, and Sawtooth the Physicker. Given his good healing ability, I think having a Physicker as my friend, which is a doctor, would be in my best interest. I don't know what the rest of my crew is going to have, so I want to make sure that there's someone there to heal me. So I'm going to go with Sawtooth. And normally when you build your crew, you do that together. So if I say I'm going to take a Physicker, maybe somebody else turns around and takes Mercy the Cold Killer because their book has that open to them, or a similar character, because it makes a lot of sense. And let's see here. I did like Marlene the Pugilist. I think that is a interesting character. Probably not as interesting as like an extortionist or a cold killer could be, but I like the idea of maybe a character that wants to fight Bricks, but Bricks doesn't really ever want to fight them. So that's going to be Marlene the Pugilist. The other people that are on this friends list are people that you might know around town, but you don't have like a solid connection with, not like you do with the two that you select. The two that you select also will tell your GM kind of what kind of stories that you want to play, so be careful with your choices on this. And through play, you can add more friends or enemies, rivals, etc. By just your interactions, and you can always select add here and add as many as you want. Let me just go ahead and delete that real quick here. Alright, so we've done that. Let's see. Next we choose our vice. Vice is done by a list of options, and just so you guys can see, here's how the options list out on the character sheet as printed. The Roll20 sheet doesn't list them there, so you do have to kind of know what they are. I'm going to read them off just so you have them. Here's Faith, which is dedication to an unseen power, forgotten god, ancestor, etc. Gambling, you crave games of chance, betting on sporting events, etc. Luxury, expensive and ostentatious displays of opulence. Obligation, you're devoted to a family, a cause, organization, charity, etc. Pleasure is gratification from lovers, food, drink, drugs, art, theater, etc. Stupor is oblivion in the abuse of drugs, drinking in excess, getting beaten to a pulp in fighting pits, etc. And weird, experimenting with strange essences, consulting with rogue spirits, observing bizarre rituals or taboos, etc. So the cool thing about a vice is it is how your character relieves stress, but it's also how your character can get involved in some kind of crazy things. Your vices can do things like get in your way, which is where that XP advancement came from. If you have issues with your vice or trauma during the session, like let's say you're a gambler and the job involves knocking over a gambling den, your vice could get in the way because you may decide that it's not in your best interest to be seen in the gambling den knocking it over, because other dens will not accept you anymore after that. So I think what I'm going to say is he's a factory worker, and I really like the idea of gambling because it's kind of like the easy to get into vice. It's you're done, you've got your paycheck, you'll throw a couple coins, throw some dice. Next thing he knows, he's upside down in debts. So we're going to go with gambling, and I'm going to say that he plays a lot of dice. So I'm just going to add that little note there. The other thing that you want to do is pick out a vice purveyor. So let's take a look and see if I have vice purveyors on here. Looks like I do not. So let's go back to Evil Hat's website here. And I believe it is the People's page. It is not. Factions, GM reference, rules reference, rumors, scores. Doesn't look like it's here. So because I don't want to lose where I am inside the book, give me just 1 second. I'm going to bookmark this, and then we're going to see if we can find vice purveyors. Let's see. No, I'm not getting vice purveyors right now. Here we go. Overindulgence. Talking about vicing activities. And it's not there. Well, we're going to kind of make up a vice purveyor for now. Hopefully I can find it before the next video. Let's say that our vice purveyor is McCree, who is a man of chance. So he is McCree 2 Aces is his name. And McCree probably has some debts against me, and that's kind of how I'm going to probably get involved in the gang, is I just want to pay off some of my debts, or something possibly more devious than as straightforward as that. So that is that. Let's go ahead and go back to characters here, back into character creation. Okay. Now we record our name, alias, and look. I've already got that done, but let's take a look back over at the Cutter here and see, because I believe they have some suggestions on look. Looks like they don't. So we can pretty much put anything we want. In one iteration of the game, they did have some examples of looks. I'm going to say, based upon our picture over here, kind of a dusky, bearded, large man, and that'll just kind of describe who Bricks is, just by what he normally looks like. Let's see, from here we would review our details, and it looks like we have most everything. We've covered all of it, and now we're pretty much ready to play the game. We've already done our name, family name, and there are some examples of looks inside the book, which I don't know why I'm turning it to you guys, because you guys can't see it because it's a backlit thing. So I could say something like a hooded cape or eelskin bodysuit, or I could just make stuff up like I did. That's entirely an option that's available to you. So I'm just going to go down the character creation summary. When we do character creation for the other classes, we'll do the summary and do it kind of quick. This one I just wanted to take some time to show you guys real quick, and I'll probably have their special ability and their stuff already thought about ahead of time. That way I can quickly show you kind of a rundown of what it looks like. We've chosen our playbook, we chose our heritage and background, we've assigned the 4 dots, we've taken a special ability, we've chosen a friend or friend and rival, and we've also chosen our vice. We recorded our name, alias, and look. The first thing that we would do going into a game is the GM would ask us, hey, what is your load going to be? Basically, the idea between light, normal, and heavy load is light, you are faster and less conspicuous. You blend in with the citizens. For normal, you look like a scoundrel, ready for trouble, and heavy, you are slower and look like an operative on a mission. There's also what is called encumbered, which is 7 and 9 for a normal character, and you are so overburdened that you can't do anything except to move very slowly. That one probably wouldn't come up all that often, but it is there because there are times where a character could possibly do that. So during gameplay, my GM asked me what's my loadout. I'm going to tell him that I probably want a light loadout for the mission that we're talking about, because I'm going to say that for now our gang is probably assassins, because that's going to be the first gang that comes up. The crew of assassins, we want to move lightly. We don't want to get in too much trouble, so I want to wear down. I don't want people being suspicious of us. If we were normal, the GM might give people a chance to really detect us, but because we're going light, we have a little bit more leeway. That means I can have 3 things. And the really cool thing about this is, during gameplay, I don't have to say, okay, I'm bringing my fine heavy weapon, which counts as 2, and a pistol. Instead, what I can do is leave all of this blank, and when it comes time to actually use it, I can then pick it up. So basically, I have 3 slots, and I could have anything inside this bag, but once I decide what it is there forever. If you've played Dungeon World, it's the same basic idea about how backpacks work. So I like the idea of a scary weapon or tool, and so I say during the game I pull from my backpack this wicked, like, 2-man saw that's been heavily modified to have a lead pipe to keep it rigid on the back, and I'm swinging it around like it's a big giant like scythe. That is my scary weapon or tool. a little bit of both in that case. And I have 2 more spots available to me. And then as the adventure goes along, I get hurt and I decide that I need some armor. So armor takes up 2 slots. So that's going to be all 3 slots that I brought with me, is my scary weapon or tool and my armor. If you have boxes that are connected, that means that they're going to take up that many number of slots inside there. So if I wanted heavy armor, that would take up 3 slots. Being a light load, that would be everything that I have. Now, there are ways to increase your loads, like getting rigging, which is a crew upgrade you can take, and then the mule upgrade from the cutter actually allows you to increase your load again as well. So if you're a cutter, you could get pretty nasty with it, and take stuff like armor plus heavy armor plus some weapons, and get pretty ridiculous. I think it comes out to like 10 load is the most you can carry, which is outrageous. That becomes like your heavy load. So let's talk a little bit about the cutter, because I wanted to talk to you guys about what kind of play you can explore. Again, your cutter is more of like your fighter in D&D or similar analogous type games. So when I play the cutter, I am a dangerous, intimidating fighter. I want to be in the front lines. Most of my abilities are geared towards stepping up front and getting in the mix of things. And that's kind of the way that you typically would want to play a cutter. However, remember, you can take advantages from other books. So if you wanted to, let's say, open up your opportunities and become more of a ranged combatant, try looking at something like the Hound, which is typically a little bit like your ranger type character. You could take something like Sharpshooter, which allows you to push yourself and be able to shoot at his extreme range or unleash a barrage of rapid fire against the enemy. Both things that could really help you out for when you are not toe-to-toe with things like you're pretty much built to do. So that gives you an idea of who Brix is and what he can do, how I would probably play him. What I'm thinking inside my head for Brix is that because he's a gambler, he's going to take risks. He's going to try and get himself in a situation to try and prove himself. And that's probably why he's so tough, is he's gotten himself in these bad scraps over and over, and like he hasn't paid debts, so he's been beaten up to repay his debts, which has not fared well for him. And so maybe he's a little bit more of like a gruffer person to deal with. If you've seen Blades in the Dark on JP's channel, Aldo, he's kind of a similar mindset where he comes from Duskfall. He's kind of a street urchin type person from the underworld. But actually, I think he has the academic background, if I remember right. But regardless, that cutter should feel different than my cutter, because mine is coming from a factory working background and is going to be a little bit gruffer, whereas Aldo is a little bit more reserved normally. While he can fight quite a bit and fight well, he's not going to start as jaded as this character is going to probably start. And that's just kind of the narrative of the game. Just like any tabletop RPG, your narrative will define your character and allow you to expand beyond just the numbers. So while this character sheet may not seem like it's super in-depth, as you begin playing and you begin picking out different abilities and things like that, you can make the character that you really want to fit the idea that you have inside your head. So that's basically how to make the cutter. We are going to go down and do the other classes, but again, we're going to do them at a little quicker pace. And when we do the crews, there are 2 ways to generate a crew. So we'll go through that individually. The crews take a little bit more time to talk about how you could typically play them, because there's not really anything within at least a straightforward class like the cutter that would determine like if it's better for you to focus on claiming territory, or if it's better for you to focus on taking down targets, or things like that. Some of these things are built for certain modes of play, but the cutter is fluid. It will flow between all of the different modes of play, and as we encounter the different types of modes, I'll talk about each one when it becomes relevant. That way it's not overwhelming. With that said, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Again, I'm going to be launching a Blades in the Dark campaign. Should be at the beginning of next month. I got to get with the players, figure out what kind of crew they want to be, what kind of characters they want to be, and we're going to build all that in person live on Twitch when we get the game started. And then we're going to show everything that you see inside my Roll20 is going to be on there. You guys probably won't see the maps. You'll at least see our numbers and see our bright and shiny faces inside the little window. Playing the game, having a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys tune in and support that project. We're going to play a campaign as long as we can, whether the characters meet their final end and their gang is completely destroyed, or maybe these characters pass on to something bigger and better, or something far worse, because there are elder gods and things like that that could make your day worse than death very quickly. So make sure you tune in, and if you have any comments, suggestions for us, throw those inside the chat box. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe, comment, spread the love, get the stuff out there so that we can get more people playing this game, D&D, Legend of the Five Rings, or anything else really out there just playing tabletop games. As always, guys, I'll see you at the gaming table.